Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. Before the story starts, here's a decision point I want you to notice. When someone disappears, the mind will invent explanations just to keep hope alive. One practical boundary that matters in a crisis is this. Do not let maybe become your only plan. Document what you know, ask direct questions early, and protect your future even while you search. In my case, I treated uncertainty like a marriage vow. I kept paying an emotional mortgage on a house she had already left. That choice cost me years I cannot get back. The last morning I saw Denise, Milwaukee looked rinsed clean by spring rain. Our duplex on the edge of Washington Heights smelled like lemon cleaner and dark coffee. Denise had that habit of wiping the counter twice, like the first pass was for dirt and the second was for worry. She stood by the stove in a cardigan the color of butter, humming a hymn she only half remembered. I teased her about it. She pressed her lips together like she was hiding a smile, then reached up and touched a small hoop earring in her left ear, a nervous gesture I had learned to read as, "I am thinking harder than I am saying." We had been married 12 years. No children, not because we did not want them, but because life kept landing on later. I fixed city buses for a living. Rear axles, air brakes, grimy engines that never stopped needing something. Denise was a patient coordinator at a dental clinic, the kind of person who could calm a grown man in a waiting room by saying, "You are safe here," and somehow making it true. We were not rich, but we were steady. Every Sunday, she baked sweet potato pie in a glass dish with a chipped handle, and I played my old saxophone in the basement after dinner, not well, but with feeling. Pause for a second, because what happens next is the kind of detail people ignore in real life until it ruins them. If you ever had someone say, "I'll be right back," and your gut fell off, you already know. Hit like right now if you believe instincts are real. Subscribe if you want more stories that unfold like this one. And share this with someone who always gives people the benefit of the doubt, because that kindness can cost you. That morning, Denise said, "We are out of bread." Not milk, not cigarettes. Bread. She liked a specific kind, seeded and dense, from a Polish bakery down on North Avenue. She kept the paper bags folded and reused them as drawer liners, because she believed throwing away anything that could still serve a purpose was an insult to the work it took to earn it. "I will be right back," she said, tying her hair into a low bun. She kissed my cheek with the quick, familiar warmth of routine. Then she took her purse and the old canvas tote with sunflowers on it. I should tell you what I noticed and ignored. Denise paused at the door longer than usual, her hand on the knob. She looked down the hallway toward our bedroom as if she had forgotten something. Then she said too casually, "If I am late, start without me." I laughed because she was never late. I said, "I am not eating breakfast without you." She gave a small shrug that felt like a decision being filed away. I watched her walk to her car, a dull blue sedan with a dented rear bumper. The rain had stopped, but the gutters still ran. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The kettle cooled on the stove. My saxophone case sat open on the couch because I had promised myself I would practice scales after breakfast. At 40 minutes, I called the bakery, embarrassed to sound like a man who could not handle a simple errand. The woman who answered said, "Honey, we have not seen Denise today." I asked if a blue sedan had been outside. She said she could not say. I thanked her and hung up, my stomach tightening the way it does when you miss a step on stairs and your body catches you before your mind does. I drove the route, slow at first, then faster. The streets were damp, reflecting traffic lights like smeared paint. I checked the corner store by the bus stop. I checked the gas station where Denise sometimes bought gum. I checked the bakery parking lot twice, circling like I was afraid to commit to reality of an empty space. I went home and sat on the edge of our bed because that felt like the most honest place to be scared. Denise's side was made neatly. Her pillow still held the shallow dip of her head from the night before. I called her cell phone. It rang until the automated voice said she was unavailable. My first decision point came at noon, and I did not know it was one. I could have called her sister in Chicago immediately and said, Something is wrong. Instead, I told myself not to make a scene. Denise hated drama. She hated police lights. She hated being in a situation. So I waited another hour. I warmed soup. I folded laundry that did not need folding. I pretended my hands could keep my mind from running. When I finally called her sister, Rochelle answered with a voice that was already impatient. "Malcolm," she said, "what is it?" When I told her Denise had not returned, Rochelle went quiet, then said, "She was not with me." By evening, I was at the police station, the fluorescent lights turning everyone's skin a sickly color. The officer at the desk looked tired, like he had spent his whole shift absorbing other people's panic. He asked, "Any history of her leaving?" I said no. He asked, "Any arguments lately?" I said we had argued about money, the way couples do, my overtime, her wanting to take a weekend trip, my reluctance to spend. He nodded like he had heard the same song 1,000 times. "Sometimes adults take space," he said. "Give it 24 hours. The words landed like a slap disguised as advice. At home, I sat with the porch light on. All night, every car that slowed made my heart jump. At 2 a.m., I heard a door somewhere in the neighborhood and stood up so fast my knees barked. It was not ours. At 4 a.m., the pipes clicked, and I mistook it for keys in a lock. I whispered Denise's name into the dark, not like a prayer, more like a habit I could not stop. When the sun came up, I realized I had been clenching my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. I made coffee and poured a second cup by accident, then stared at it until it went cold. Over the next week, I learned how quickly the world moves on from your emergency. My supervisor gave me 2 days off, then called to ask when I would be back because the fleet was behind. Rochelle drove in from Chicago, furious and trembling, and walked through our house like she was searching for evidence the walls might provide. She opened Denise's closet and pressed Denise's blouses to her face. "This does not make sense," she kept saying, as if repeating it could force the universe to correct itself. We posted flyers at laundromats, diners, and church bulletin boards. Denise's smile, frozen in a photo taken at a summer festival, stared back at us like a question no one wanted to answer. The detective assigned to the case, a black woman named Detective Henson, was the first person who treated me like I was not foolish for being terrified. She asked careful questions. Any unusual purchases? Any new friends? Any changes in her routine? I told her Denise had started going to a weekday Bible study at a small church on the south side. I told her Denise had been collecting vintage postcards from thrift stores, Chicago skylines, old beach scenes, places we had never been. Denise kept them in a shoebox under our bed, organized by state, like she was building a map in secret. Detective Henson wrote that down, and I felt suddenly ashamed, like I had failed a test by not noticing what the postcards meant. Weeks became months. Rochelle went home, but she called every Sunday, her voice cracking in small places she tried to hide. My mother told me to eat. My father told me to be a man, which sounded, in his mouth, like be silent. Church ladies brought casseroles and avoided my eyes. At work, men patted my shoulder with the awkward tenderness of people who do not have language for grief. I stopped playing the saxophone because music made the empty rooms echo louder. The sweet potato pie dish sat untouched. I could not bear the thought of eating something Denise had always made for comfort. The second decision point arrived at 6 months. Detective Henson asked if Denise and I had ever discussed separation. The question offended me so deeply I almost shut down. "No," I said, sharp. "We were fine." Henson did not argue. She just looked at me steadily and said, "Sometimes fine is where people hide things." That night, I opened Denise's shoebox of postcards. At the bottom, beneath a stack labeled Florida, there was a folded paper, an itinerary for a bus route from Milwaukee to Tampa, purchased 2 weeks before she disappeared. My hands went numb. I sat on the floor holding that paper like it was a piece of glass. I wanted to tell myself it was for someone else, a patient at her clinic, a friend from Bible study. But the name on the receipt was Denise's. Her handwriting was in the margin. "Keep calm." Not from Malcolm. Not talk to him. Just keep calm. as if she were coaching herself through something she had already chosen. I took the paper to Detective Henson the next day. Henson's jaw tightened in a way that suggested she was not surprised. "This helps," she said gently, which is what people say when the truth hurts but is useful. I drove home and sat in the car for an hour, staring at our front steps, not ready to go inside and breathe air Denise had left behind. The case did not resolve neatly. There was no dramatic phone call, no sudden discovery. There were small, painful updates. A bank withdrawal here, a new phone number there, all of it faint as footprints in snow. Henson told me, carefully, that adults had a right to leave, even if the leaving was cruel. But, she added, "We still investigate because you deserve to know she is alive." Those words, alive, were a strange mercy. Alive meant I had not failed to save her from something. Alive also meant she had chosen a world without me and could live in it with her lungs full of air, while mine felt permanently tight. I kept our home the way it was for too long. I left Denise's cardigan on the hook by the door. I kept her toothbrush in the cup by the sink. I told myself it was respect. It was not. It was bargaining. If I preserve her space, maybe she would return to claim it. Years passed like that, me refusing to close a chapter because I believed closing it would make me responsible for the ending. Rochelle eventually stopped calling weekly and started calling monthly. Then she started calling only on Denise's birthday, her voice quiet and distant. "I do not know what to do with my anger," she admitted once. I told her I did not either. I moved through life like a man wearing a coat that was too heavy for the weather. I went to work. I paid bills. I nodded at my neighbors. But the inside of me stayed stuck on that damp spring morning. I developed strange rituals. Every Friday after my shift, I stopped at the same bakery and bought the seeded bread Denise loved. Even though I did not like it, I kept it on the counter until it went stale. Sometimes I imagined Denise walking in, scolding me for wasting food, and imagined scolding felt better than silence. I did not date. I did not flirt. I could not figure out where to place my loyalty when my marriage was neither alive nor legally dead. When I was 47, I finally filed for a legal declaration of abandonment because my mortgage company needed paperwork, and my chest felt like it was packed with stones while I signed. The judge was respectful, but the system treated my life like a file that needed closing. I walked out of the courthouse and sat on a bench watching pigeons fight over crumbs. I thought absurdly about Denise scolding pigeons as if they could understand manners. That was the kind of grief it was random, sharp, and stupid with love. After that, I sold the duplex and moved into a smaller house in Madison, a place with creaky radiators and a view of a narrow lake I rarely visited. Time did what time does. It made my hair gray, made my knees complain, made my parents disappear one funeral at a time. I went back to the saxophone, but only late at night, when the notes could be private. I became the kind of man who sat in diners alone and read the newspaper slowly, not because the news mattered, but because turning pages felt like proof I was still here. In Madison, I joined a small black church with a choir that sang like they were holding each other up. People asked about my past politely. I learned to say, "My wife left," without letting my voice break. 20 years after Denise vanished, I was 61 and working part-time at a music store that repaired instruments. I liked the quiet precision, pads, springs, lacquer, the tiny screws that required patience. I had a habit of polishing saxophones the way Denise used to wipe counters, twice, as if the second pass could smooth out worry. One Saturday in October, the air smelled like wet leaves and chimney smoke. A young man came in with an old trumpet and asked if I could fix a stuck valve. While I worked, he showed me photos on his phone. Family, vacations, a wedding. I pretended to care the way older men do, with friendly nods. He swiped to a photo of a backyard barbecue. A black man in a crisp polo had his arm around a woman in a white sundress. The woman's hair was cut short, with silver at the temples. Her smile hit me like a physical force. It was not just resemblance. It was Denise's exact way of smiling, slightly crooked like she was privately amused. My throat tightened so fast I coughed. "Who is that?" I asked, and my voice sounded too casual, like someone trying to balance a cup that is already spilling. The young man said, "That is my Aunt Denise. She and Uncle Eric just celebrated their 20th anniversary." Then he laughed and added, "They are goals." I stared at the screen until the edges blurred. My hands were still holding the trumpet, and I had to set it down because I did not trust my fingers. The young man, whose name was Jordan, kept talking, unaware. "They moved to Tampa when I was little," he said. "Uncle Eric used to coach my little league team. Aunt Denise is the nicest person you will ever meet." Nicest. The word made my stomach twist. I managed a weak smile and asked, "What is her last name?" Jordan said it like it was nothing. It was not my last name. It had not been mine for 2 decades, and hearing someone else own it out loud felt like watching a stranger wear your wedding ring. After Jordan left, I went into the back room and sat on a stool among shelves of instrument cases. My heart thumped slowly, heavy and deliberate, like it was choosing whether to keep going. I remembered Detective Henson's voice. Alive. I had imagined living as lonely, hidden, frightened. Not barbecues. Not anniversaries. Not someone saying goals. I made myself breathe. I washed my face in the tiny sink, staring at my reflection, as if I could find a younger man who had waited with the porch light on. Then I did something I had not done in years. I searched Denise's name online, using the last name Jordan had said. Her life was there, neat as a brochure. A church newsletter from Tampa. Photos of community events. A charity walk with matching shirts. Denise, older, smiling, holding a casserole dish at a potluck like she had always belonged there. A post celebrating 20 years of marriage to my best friend Eric. 20 years. That meant the wedding happened right around the time she disappeared from my life. My body reacted before my mind could translate. My hands shook, my vision narrowed, my mouth went dry. I scrolled and scrolled like I could reach through the screen and grab the years back. There were children in the photos. 2 girls, now grown, hugging Denise with the easy affection of daughters. That night, I walked by the lake in Madison, the wind cutting through my coat. The water was dark, and the streetlights made thin gold lines across it. I kept thinking not about rage, but about ordinary moments. Denise folding bakery bags, Denise sorting postcards, Denise telling me to eat slower. I had carried her absence like a weight, and she had carried a new name like it fit. I wanted to call Rochelle, but I could not stand the sound of her pain joining mine. I sat on a bench until my fingers went numb. My mind offered 100 possible explanations, each one less believable than the last. The simplest explanation was also the cruelest. Denise left because she wanted to, and she built a new life on the other side of my questions. In the following week, I faced my third decision point. Do I confront her or do I let knowing be enough? I wrote her an email and deleted it. I wrote a letter and tore it up. I practiced sentences out loud in my kitchen. Why? How could you? Did you ever think of me? Every sentence sounded like begging, and I refused to beg for basic humanity from someone who had already refused it once. But I also refused to let her keep the story clean. Her life looked spotless online. Faith, family, celebrations. My pain had no place in that picture. I decided I would not explode into her world like a storm. I would show up like a fact. I took a Friday off and flew to Tampa with a small suitcase and a folder of papers, our marriage certificate, missing person reports, the bus itinerary I had found, and a photo of us in our 20s at a summer festival by Lake Michigan. The plane ride felt unreal, like my body was moving without my permission. In Tampa, the air was warm and smelled like salt and asphalt. Palm trees lined streets like they were part of a set. I rented a car and drove to the church listed in the newsletter. I arrived early and sat in the parking lot, watching families walk and holding Bibles and toddlers and coffee cups. My hands were steady, which surprised me. My heart, however, felt like it was bracing for impact. Denise appeared near the entrance, laughing with a woman in a bright hat. She moved with the calm confidence of someone who believed she was safe in her own choices. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, her face fuller, but it was her. She wore a small heart-shaped pendant at her throat, the same kind I had given her, though I could not tell if it was the exact one. That detail made me dizzy. I watched her greet people, touch shoulders, tilt her head the way she used to tilt it when she listened to me talk about bus engines. For a moment, I did not hate her. I just mourned the version of my life that had never gotten to exist. I stepped out of the car and walked toward her. The sound of my shoes on the pavement felt too loud. When Denise turned and saw me, her face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked around as if she expected someone to tell her this was not real. The woman beside her asked, "Denise, are you okay?" Denise swallowed and said, "I need a moment." Her voice was still her voice. It was the same instrument, just played in a different key. She walked a few steps away from the crowd, and I followed, stopping at a respectful distance like she was a stranger who could still hurt me. "Malcolm," she said. She did not ask how I was. She did not say my name like she missed it. She said it like a door she had locked long ago had suddenly opened by itself. I replied, "I saw you in a photo." My voice was quiet. I wanted it that way. I wanted to prove I was not there to beg or scream. Denise glanced toward the church doors, then back at me. "You should not be here," she whispered. That sentence, more than anything, told me who she had become. Not sorry, not ashamed, protective of her new life. I pulled the photo of us from my folder and held it out. Denise did not take it. She stared at it as if it might burn her. 20 years, I said. "You left me and spent 20 years with someone else." Denise's eyes filled, but her tears did not soften her posture. She said, "I did not know how to stay." I almost laughed at the smallness of that explanation. "You could have said that." I replied, "You could have told me you were unhappy. You could have left a note. You could have called my mother. You let me go to the police like you were dead." Denise pressed her fingertips to her necklace, the same nervous gesture from our kitchen doorway decades ago. "I was afraid," she said, "afraid of hurting you." I felt something inside me go cold and clear. "You chose a method that hurt me for 20 years. I answered. She tried to speak again, and I raised my hand, not aggressively, just firmly. "I did not come for explanations that make you feel better," I said. "I came to tell you the truth. Rochelle cried for you until she could not cry anymore. My father died thinking I had failed you. I stopped playing music. I stopped trusting my own memory. And you stood in photos smiling." Denise's face tightened. "You do not understand what my life was like," she whispered. The old me would have rushed to understand. The older me recognized that as a move, turned the focus away from what she did and on to what she felt. "Then you should have left like an adult," I said. "Adults use words." At that point, a man approached, Eric, I assumed. Tall, fit, neatly dressed, the kind of man who looked comfortable in sunlight. He glanced between us, sensing danger without knowing its shape. "Denise?" he asked. Denise's eyes flicked to him, panic and calculation mixing in her expression. She said, too, quickly, "This is Malcolm. From Milwaukee." Eric extended his hand. I did not take it. Not out of rudeness, out of self-respect. My refusal hung there, simple and undeniable. Eric's face hardened slightly. "Is everything okay?" he asked her. Denise swallowed and said, "Yes. Please go inside." Eric hesitated, then walked away, not fully convinced. Denise looked at me with something that might have been pleading. "Do not do this here," she said. "I am not doing anything," I replied. "I am standing." I made my fourth decision point in that parking lot. I could expose her publicly, say loud enough for the church ladies to hear. She abandoned her husband. I did not because she deserved protection, but because I refused to let her choices turn me into someone I did not recognize. I handed her an envelope. Inside were copies of the missing person report and our marriage certificate. "Keep these," I said, "not to punish you, to remind you that your life has a shadow." Denise held the envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. She whispered, "What do you want from me?" I answered honestly, "Nothing. I want my mind back. I want my years to stop being a question mark." Denise's lips trembled. "I loved you," she said, and that sentence nearly broke me because love could be true and still be cowardly. I shook my head. You loved a version of me that could absorb your fear. I replied, but you did not love me enough to be honest. She stared at the pavement. I thought you would hate me, she murmured. I thought you would never let me go. That hit me, the story she had told herself to justify disappearing. In her version, she was escaping a cage. In mine, she had removed the floor and left me falling. Denise, I said quietly, you did not have to vanish to be free. You just had to tell the truth. She closed her eyes as if that truth hurt more than anything I had said. I left before the service started. I drove to a small diner with sticky tables and a bell on the door, ordered eggs I could barely taste, and watched families laugh over pancakes. I expected to feel victorious, but I felt emptied. Confrontation did not restore the years. It did not return to my parents. It did not give Rochelle her peace. It just confirmed what I had resisted for 2 decades. Denise was not missing. She had been absent on purpose. I went back to my hotel and slept like a man who had finally stopped keeping watch. The next morning, I flew home without contacting Rochelle. I needed to decide how to tell her, without handing her a fresh wound wrapped in a bow of closure. When I did tell Rochelle, I chose a Tuesday evening, because Sundays belonged to grief already. Rochelle listened in silence on the phone, and the silence was worse than any yelling. Then she said very flatly, so she let Mama die without knowing. I whispered, yes. Rochelle inhaled sharply, like she had been punched. Do not ask me to forgive her, she said. I did not. I said, I am not asking you to do anything. I am telling you the facts. Rochelle's voice cracked then. Did she look happy? The question broke my heart because it revealed how deeply Rochelle still wanted a story where Denise's absence had been punishment enough. I said carefully, she looked like someone who learned to live with her choices. Rochelle exhaled and said, then she can keep them. Over the next months, I noticed changes in myself that felt both sad and relieving. I stopped checking my front window when cars slowed. I stopped buying the seeded bread. I brought the sweet potato pie dish out of the cabinet and made a pie myself, clumsy and uneven, but real. I played my saxophone in the afternoon with the windows open, letting neighbors hear the imperfect notes. I realized I had been living as if joy would be betrayal, as if smiling would mean Denise had won. That was a childish frame. I had never questioned. Denise did not win. She simply left. I was the one who had to decide whether my remaining years would be another form of waiting. Denise emailed me once, 2 months after Tampa. The message was short and careful, like a person walking across thin ice. She wrote that she was sorry for the pain she caused, that she had been young and afraid, and that she hoped I could find peace. She asked if I would keep her secret from her daughters. That last sentence made my hand shake again, not with grief, but with anger. Even now, she wanted control. Even now, she wanted me to carry something for her. I replied with one line, your truth is yours to tell. Then I blocked her. That was my 5th decision point, and it mattered. I refused the role she kept assigning me, the keeper of her consequences. A year later, I met a woman named Cynthia at the music store. She brought in a clarinet for her grandson and teased me about being too serious. Cynthia had laughed lines and a calm gaze that did not flinch at my quietness. We started having coffee after my shift. She asked about my life with the directness of someone who respects time. I told her the story in plain language. I did not dramatize it. I did not soften it. Cynthia listened and said, that is grief with an open ending. I am sorry. She did not ask me to hurry up and heal. She did not ask me to prove I was over it. That simple respect felt like a miracle. Cynthia and I did not rush into anything. We went to Fish Fry Fridays at a VFW hall, sat near the kitchen because Cynthia liked the clatter and noise. We walked farmers markets. She showed me how to choose good peaches by smell instead of squeezing them. When I got quiet, she did not take it personally. She would just squeeze my hand once and keep walking. For the first time in decades, I felt my body stop bracing for disaster. And that is what abandonment does. It trains your nervous system to stay on alert forever. Denise had left and built a new life, but the damage she caused lived in my muscles, my sleep, my reflexes. Cynthia helped me relearn safety without demanding I erase the past. I still think about Denise sometimes, but the thoughts arrive differently now. They're less like knives and more like old weather, something that passes through without taking the roof off. I imagine Denise's daughters someday learning the truth and feeling the ground shift beneath their feet. I do not wish that pain on them. I also do not owe them protection from it. The hardest truth I learned is this: you can love someone and still be harmed by them. Love is not proof of good character. Denise may have loved me in the way she was capable of, but her capacity did not include honesty when it mattered. That is not romance. That is a warning label. Some evenings, Cynthia and I sit on my porch in Madison with 2 glasses of iced tea, listening to distant traffic and crickets. The porch light is off most nights now, not out of bitterness, out of reality. I leave it on only when Cynthia drives home late from her sister's place, because that is what the light is for. People who are actually coming back. That distinction seems obvious, but it took me years to learn it. Denise's disappearance trained me to confuse hope with loyalty. Now I understand loyalty includes loyalty to yourself. You do not abandon your own future to prove you love someone who already left. When people ask about my life, I no longer say, "My wife is missing." I say, "My first wife left." The difference is not cruelty. It is clear. Missing keeps the door open. Left tells the truth. I also stopped carrying the folder papers everywhere, the way I used to. I keep it in a drawer, not as a shrine, but as a record. Sometimes I open it, glance at the marriage certificate, and feel a soft grief for the young man who believed permanence was something you could earn by being steady. I wish I could put a hand on his shoulder and tell him, steady is good, but steadiness does not control other people's choices. I never heard from Detective Henson again, but I think about her sometimes. She offered me dignity in the early days when everyone else offered me suspicion or impatience. She taught me that truth can be slow and still be true. I also think about the postcards Denise collected. Florida, beaches, palm trees. I used to see them as clues to a mystery. Now I see them as rehearsal for a decision. People often tell you who they are becoming in small, quiet ways. They leave breadcrumbs not because they want to be stopped, but because part of them wants to be seen. I did not see Denise's breadcrumbs. I saw the version of Denise I wanted. That is, my accountability in the story. There is no neat moral here, no clean justice. Denise did not collapse under the weight of her choices. She built a respected life. She found a community. She smiled in photos. Meanwhile, I spent years swallowing questions that turned into acid. That imbalance is hard to accept, especially if you want the world to punish people who do harm. But life does not run on fairness. It runs on consequences, and consequences are not always public. Denise's consequence may arrive quietly in old age, in a moment when she needs comfort and realizes her story has a missing chapter. My consequence arrived earlier, in the years I lost. The only power I had was deciding what happened next. Sometimes, late at night, I pick up my saxophone and play a simple melody Denise used to like, not as a tribute to her, but as a tribute to the part of me that remained capable of tenderness even after betrayal. The notes are not perfect. They wobble. My breath is not as strong as it used to be. But the sound fills the room, and the room does not feel haunted anymore. It feels lived in. That is what healing looks like for me. Not forgetting, not forgiving on command, but reoccupying my own life. Denise left for bread and never came back. I will not leave myself behind again. The last time I checked, Denise's online photos still showed the same smile. I did not click through them. I did not need to. Curiosity is another form of waiting. Cynthia and I planted a small garden behind my house. Tomatoes, basil, a stubborn little rose bush that refused to bloom the first season. When it finally bloomed the next year, Cynthia laughed and said, "It needed time." I understood the metaphor, but I did not worship it. Some things need time. Some things need a decision. My life needed decisions. Turning off the porch light, blocking the email, telling Rochelle the facts, cooking the pie myself. These were not dramatic moments. They were quite reclaiming. I keep one object from Denise on purpose, The glass pie dish with the chipped handle. Not because it belongs to her, but because it belongs to a chapter of my life that was real, even if it ended cruelly. I refused to let her rewrite my past as if I was nothing. I was a husband who tried. I was a man who searched. I was a person who endured an open wound longer than he should have. That is not a weakness. That is devotion without direction. Now I have direction. My relationship with Cynthia is built on explicitness, where we're going, what we need, what we can offer. If anything feels unclear, we speak it out loud. Clarity is not romance. Clarity is safety. When I think back to that rainy morning in Milwaukee, I can finally see the whole frame instead of one frozen moment. Denise at the door, hand on the knob. The pause. The too casual start without me. The hidden itinerary. The postcards labeled Florida. These were not random. They were signals. I miss them because I believe love meant interpreting everything in the best possible light. Now I believe love includes the courage to be seen truthfully, even when truth risks conflict. If someone avoids telling the truth to keep calm, pay attention. Calm can be a cover for escape. I learned that the hard way. I also learned I can survive it and still make a life that is mine. If you made it to the end, you understand this wasn't just a disappearance. It was a life being rewritten without permission. If this story made you think differently about trust, silence, and closure, hit like, share this with someone who needs that reminder, and subscribe for more stories like this. Because the next one I'm telling starts with a perfect marriage too, and it falls apart in a way nobody saw coming. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Do not confuse waiting with loyalty. When I found that bus itinerary and still tried to preserve Denise's toothbrush like a promise, I was choosing denial over protection. And when I stood in that Tampa church parking lot, I chose not to humiliate her publicly. Not for her comfort, but because I refused to become someone I did not respect. Boundaries are not punishments. They are how you stop someone else's choices from owning the rest of your years. Turn off the porch light when you realize nobody is coming back. The end.